Hi, this is Professor Carter. This is the sixth video in the exposition of the neoclassical theory of production and distribution. In the last video, what we introduced is we introduced the cost side of the equilibrium, right? Because remember, we're looking at the choice of technique, and the choice of technique is going to be the producer's equilibrium, and the producer's equilibrium is going to be a relationship or an equality between two different elements on the in the producer's market. You're going to have the production function side, and you're going to have the cost side. We saw on the production function side, there's this thing called the marginal rate of technical substitution between capital and labor, which is going to be a relationship of the different marginal productivities. And then we looked on the cost of production side. That was the last video. In that last video, looking at the cost of production side, we developed the total cost curve, the total cost equation. The total cost equation is going to argue that total cost is going to be equal to the cost of capital, which is the unit price of capital times the quantity of capital, plus the total price of labor, the unit price of labor times the quantity of labor, where the unit price of capital is going to be equal to the investment price or the cost price of capital multiplied by 1 plus the rate of profit. That's the normal rate of profit. We'll talk about how that normality is going to be determined, but the point is, for our purposes, is that some normal rate of return, and that's going to be the income distribution. What's going to determine the income distribution is going to be the question that we're going to be looking at. But the point here is that the normal rate of profit is going to be associated with the cost of capital. So capital is going to include a normal rate of return, which means that the normal rate of profit is just going to be just the normal profits. If there are profits above the normal profit, those are going to be extra profits. It's called economic profits in terms of your micro theory. If you have profits that are below the normal profit, those are referred to as economic losses. And this explains how you can have in economic theory in a scenario where you have negative economic profits or economic losses and positive accounting profits, because it's not whether or not you're making an extra over the complete cost. It's going to be whether you're making the normal return that the particular firm and or industry requires given the conditions of competition, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to talk about some of that, but for our purposes here, when we draw the cost curve, you need to know that included in the price of capital is going to be that normal rate of return. Okay? Right, so with that, we move then to drawing this. So what we're going to do, okay, just as we had, okay, in our utility function, right? In our production function, we had our isoquant, all right, and our isoquant was drawn in factor space: capital, labor, quantity of capital on the vertical, quantity of labor on the horizontal. We're going to do the same thing with the cost side, okay? So we're going to also draw that in factor space, because that's where we're going to be seeing the equality. This equality is going to be an equality at the producer's equilibrium that's going to be graphically shown in factor space. Hence, what we have to do is we have to draw this in factor space. This is where we introduce here, number 5, the ISO cost line. All right, ISO cost line. All right, it's just going to, the ISO means the same, so the ISO cost line is going to be the line that has the same cost. All right, and we're going to draw it. It's going to be drawn in factor space. Okay, so if you recall the total cost is equal to the price of capital star, includes the normal rate of return, times the quantity of capital plus the wage rate times the quantity of labor. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to draw this in factor space. In order to draw this in factor space, we solve for this. We solve for K to put in slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form in factor space. All right, in factor space, or with respect to factor space. All right, so in other words, to draw the ISO cost line in factor space, we solve for K. All right, so when we go through and we solve for K, that gives us K is equal to, this is going to be total costs over the price of capital star, of course this includes the normal rate of return, minus the wage rate divided by the price of capital star includes the rate of return multiplied by the quantity of labor. Okay, where this TC over PK, this is going to be the vertical intercept. All right, vertical intercept is going to be the total cost divided by the price of capital. And this baby here, all right, this baby here, okay, the ratio of price of labor over the price of capital, this is called the factor price ratio. All right, factor price ratio. This is going to be equal to the slope. Okay, negative the factor price ratio is going to be equal to the slope, excuse me, the slope of the wage of the ISO cost line. Okay, so I'm going to come here. This is going to be equal to the quantity of labor. Okay, you're going to come here, and you're going to have the quantity of capital. All right, so you're drawing this in factor space. Okay, I'm going to draw a wage profit curve at this particular wage rate. Okay, so this is going to represent the total costs over the price of capital star. This is going to be equal to the total costs over the wage rate. Okay, so the horizontal axis is going to be the total cost over the wage rate. The vertical axis is going to be total cost over the price of the capital input. This is going to be the slope. All right, it's going to be W over PK star alpha. Okay, and so this is going to be for the particular value of alpha, right? This is going to be the price of capital alpha, and this is going to be the wage rate alpha. And so then the slope is going to be equal to the factor price ratio, W over PK star alpha, and that the intercepts are going to be equal to the total cost divided by the factor input prices. The argument here is that if all of the budget of the producer was used to spend only on capital, it would purchase zero quantities of labor input and this quantity of capital input at that factor prices. And the opposite of the case is here. If all of the budget of the cost of the producer went to produce labor, it would purchase that quantity of labor and zero quantity of output. And then you can see the trade-off there in between. And so what we have here is we're going to consider what happens as the factor price ratio decreases. All right, so I'll put this in this color here. Okay, so we're going to see what happens as the factor price ratio then begins to decrease. All right, so this is going to be, so we'll call the first one technique alpha, all right, or wage profit relation alpha or factor price ratio alpha. It's going to be a relatively high wages. All right, so these are going to be high wages. Okay, wages are going to be in the numerator there. So the relative wage or the relative factor price ratio is going to be higher when the steeper the curve, the steeper the ISO cost line as it's drawn in capital labor space. This is going to be technique beta. Okay, so in technique beta, this is going to be the slope is going to be PW over PK star beta. Okay, and then lastly, you're going to have technique gamma. All right, and technique gamma is going to be here. All right, and technique gamma is here. This is going to be technique gamma. Okay, this is going to be W over PK star gamma. This is going to be the low wages. All right, so low wages are going to give a flatter ISO cost curve. Higher wages are going to give a steeper ISO cost curve, and you can see that as the wage goes down, given the total cost being the same, okay, given the total cost being the same, given the price of capital, etc., means the same, then we're gonna have the or given the total cost is the same, you're gonna have that situation. You're gonna have that situation there. Okay, and with that, we're going to then introduce the putting the two together. Okay, and putting two together is going to be what we call producer equilibrium, and that'll be the next video. Okay, thank you.